Hey everyone, welcome to
Morning.
TokiTV. Today is March 26th. Very, very cool Sunday, our Sunday gathering for Sk'aliCh'elh-tenaut each and every week. You guys know the drill. When you're joining there in the chat, put your name in there and say hello. We'll do some quick check-ins, but I do want to say we had two dancing Debs in the background for that intro. I can see everyone, and we had Debra and Deb dancing in the background. Deborah was not dancing, but we'll get her to dance this next time. It's the three Debs on the show today talking about the dam, so this is going to be good. Quick check-ins. Deb Cruz, how are you?
Hanging in there.
Debra Ellers, how are you?
Great, ready for spring.
Yeah, and Deborah?
I am good. I am excited to be inspired by the other Debs.
Yes, Christina.
Hi, happy to be here. Happy to help people learn what they can do to breach the dams.
Yep. Howard?
The dams.
Yep.
Fine, thanks. Beautiful day, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about the dams and chiming in where I can.
Awesome. And Alejandro, I'm so sorry I sent the link late. I was freaking out. Like, where's Alejandro?
You will be kept accountable for this mistake. I hope you didn't do it again, No, I'm very fine. I'm fine. Thinking of Toki every day. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of the show, TokiTV show. Thank you so much.
There's no TokiTV show without you. Alejandro, you've been on since the beginning with Howard and
everything is for Toki.
Just appreciate
for Sk'aliCh'elh-tenaut.
It's all for her. Absolutely. Let's get ourselves centered, if you will. And let's do that. We're gonna just quietly, well, maybe not quietly, breathe out loud if you want to breathe out loud. So everyone just take some deep healing breaths while we listen to Shirley Bob's song. And the title of this song is Look at Me. And it's important for us to remember who Toki is. So let's go ahead and play that, and let's take some deep breaths. Just get ourselves grounded. That'll get us grounded and reminded as to why we are here every single week. Thank you guys for doing that with me. Today we have, someone said, two dancing Debs, for sure. We did have two dancing Debs. Debra Ellers, we've been trying to get her on this show for a while, and Christina was able to convince her, since we're talking about the dams and it's an important week. I mean, there's a lot coming up this week. And March 31st, we talked about that. We did a quick little PSA live the other evening to talk about that and how you can register to listen, register to speak. We do believe the speaking spots are all taken. However, you can still go in and register, and we'll talk more about those action steps. But a lot of people don't know why, right? We know we want to breach the dams, and we hear that a lot. And Debra Ellers has agreed to come on. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about who Debra is. So Debra grew up on a family farm in Eastern Virginia. She received her bachelor's in economics with high honors from the University of Tennessee and her Juris Doctorate at the University of Virginia School of Law. In 1985, Debra moved to Idaho, where she worked as a business attorney for 30 years. As an avid outdoor enthusiast in Idaho's pristine mountains and rivers, Debra was also involved with many conservation issues there, including public lands grazing, wolf reintroduction, and salmon recovery. In 2016, Debra retired to Port Townsend, Washington, on the Salish Sea, where she co-founded the North Olympic Orca Pod. North Olympic Orca Pod is an orca advocacy group that focuses on impacts of the lower Snake River dams and other issues facing the endangered southern resident orcas. Debra is involved with a number of groups working on the lower Snake River dams breaching, has done many presentations about the lower Snake River dams around the Northwest, and has participated in many rallies and other events related to the lower Snake River dams and the orcas. So Debra Ellers, thank you for being with us and for coming on to share some knowledge and some history with us about the dams.
Thank you, Annette. Like Deb Cruz, I'm a woman of few words, and I tend to prefer to be in the background. So I've been working on lower Snake River Dam removal now for about 30 years. So I would call myself a reluctant lower Snake River Dam breaching warrior. But it's so important right now for people to be involved and be aware of what's going on that Christina twisted my arm. So I said, okay, anything for the orcas and the salmon and dam breaching.
Awesome. Well, we're really, really happy to have you. I know you have a presentation set up. You guys at home, just get ready to learn. Get ready to learn. Tell me when you're ready, Debra.
Yeah, go ahead and roll. I'll just talk while you're getting that pulled up, Annette. So I have a very deep connection with the Snake River. Having lived in Idaho for 30 years, it was my stomping ground. And the Snake River is a place I've hiked, I've camped. I've been all around the wild parts of the Snake as well as to the dams we'll be talking about. And you'll see some pictures, and I think some maps will help you get grounded. So with that, I'm going to roll. There's tons of information to cover. So just type any questions you have into the chat, and Annette will stop me if we need to deal with something right away and before we move on. So from my experience working on the Snake River dams and salmon issues in Idaho, I have come to find that the Snake River dams to me is one of the key environmental issues of the whole Northwest, probably the whole country and the whole world, actually. The Snake River is a true treasure for everybody with those amazing salmon runs. That includes supporting our wonderful orcas, but it's also really important to the tribe. So I put the reasons why I got involved with breaching Snake River dams and have continued to be involved for 3 decades now. Avoiding extinction of wild salmon, avoiding extinction of our beloved southern resident orcas, supporting tribal treaty and Native American rights, saving taxpayer and ratepayer money, and addressing climate change and local renewable energy are the big reasons I'm involved. So I always like to start off with placing us geographically. And you can see this is a picture of the U.S. Columbia Basin Dam overview. The Snake River is the biggest tributary to the mighty Columbia River in the Northwest. The Columbia actually extends up into Canada, but I've just stuck the U.S. part in here. And you can see how many dams, they're marked there with those black obstacles that are damming up. The lower Snake River dams, I'll have a better map of them, but they take off and head over to Idaho to the east from Washington. But you can see how many dams there are depicted on this. There's 31 dams in that's called the Columbia River Systems Operation. It's basically the whole dam system that covers the Northwest. Here I have a map of the lower Snake River dams in eastern Washington. And here is a picture so you can experience the dams in all their glory. They are, starting from the bottom right hand is the oldest one, and that's Ice Harbor. Then Lower Monumental was the next one built, Little Goose, and then finally Lower Granite, built near Lewiston, Idaho. I like to show this map of the Snake River watershed. You can see how large it is. It essentially encompasses the entire state of Idaho, which is a good-sized state. It starts over in the Tetons in western Wyoming. You can see up there Jackson Lake, Yellowstone Lake over there. That's where the Snake arises, and the beautiful Tetons. Cold, clear, wonderful water coming out of there. Then it traverses the entire state of Idaho across the southern plain there. And there's quite a bit of agriculture and dairies in that middle part of the Snake down there. Then as you get over to the western part, which is the Oregon border, it starts to get wild again. There's once you get beyond, the Boise, Ontario region and head up, it turns due north, which is unusual for a river. It gets really wild again. You have places like Hell's Canyon and the Grand Ronde, which are incredibly scenic, remote, and full of wildlife like bighorn sheep and elk, as well as that's still some remnant salmon runs in there. And I'd like to point out that the Snake River rises in these beautiful headwaters of Idaho. And these are all places I've been. They're places that mean a lot to me. I'm very connected with these places. So we have Marsh Creek, which is the headwaters of the River of No Return, the Salmon River. One of the most pristine places you can imagine. That's the start of the Salmon River, the Middle Fork of the Salmon. Big Creek, Idaho is in a wilderness area. And I'd like to mention this one because I backpacked in there, oh golly, I'd say in the 1990s sometime. And I actually saw a wild salmon. And I thought about the trip that wild salmon had made to come all the way from the ocean, up the Columbia, up the Snake, up the Middle Fork, and then up Big Creek. That's 5,000 feet in elevation. It's like 800 or 900 miles. I was just in awe of this fish. And it just struck me that I had to do something to save them, because as I hiked around Idaho and camped out in these places, you know, you go into town and have a beer afterwards. And like places like Stanley, Idaho, just out of Redfish Lake here, you'd see all these pictures of people with these giant salmons. You'd see places like Redfish Lake that were named because of the bountiful salmon that were there. It literally turned the lake red with the sockeye salmon. So there were thousands and thousands and thousands of these huge fish coming back to the mountains of Idaho in the 1930s, 1940s. People would talk about digging irrigation ditches, and they would like throw the salmon out because there were so many in the ditches. It just was unbelievable. But I knew for one thing, other than that one wild salmon I saw in Big Creek, I hardly ever saw salmon in Idaho. So I started looking at why was this happening? Why were there not salmon in all these streams that used to have them? One other place very special to me is the Rapid River. It's a really important fishing site for the Nez Perce, who call themselves the Nimipu. And it's some of the most pristine water coming out of the Seven Devils, just above the Snake River. Again, it used to be just full of salmon. So Idaho is just key to this understanding why the Snake River debate is so strongly contested, why it's important. So Idaho and a little bit of Washington and a little bit of Oregon are really the salmon stronghold above the Snake River dams. Because once those fish get beyond the upper Snake River Dam, which is Lower Granite, then they have all this pristine mountain and wilderness territory to spawn in and grow. But before that, these four lower Snake River dams are essentially a chokehold on those fish getting up and also the young ones getting down. So Annette asked me, she says, I don't even know why these dams were put in. Could you just go over the history? Well, I said, you've come to the right place, Annette, because I have got just I'm a whole fountain of minutia about the Snake River Dam. So we'll run quickly through the history, because I do tend to think if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. So the Snake River dams did not become authorized until 1945. It was sort of this post-World War II euphoria, I guess I'd call it. And there were the big dams were built like Bonneville and Grand Coulee in the 1930s. And the nation was in this grip of dam building frenzy, I guess I call it. And plus, the dams had provided important power. Those up like Bonneville and Grand Coulee had provided really important power for World War II industries to build planes and stuff. So the country was just really in this dam building frenzy. So the U.S. Army Corps was authorized to build such dams as are necessary to provide slackwater navigation from Tri-Cities to Lewiston. It's about 140 miles. Now, interestingly, it was really navigation, barging, that was driving the push for the Snake River dams. Hydropower was really added as an afterthought so the Army Corps could try to boost the benefit to cost ratio. The wheat growers in the Palouse, which is the wheat growing region of eastern Washington and northern Idaho, had been pushing for barging for a long time because they just hated the tariffs they had to pay with the railroads. So they had been after Congress for a long time to try to push this through. So finally, they succeeded. And I frankly think some of it, too, was giving the Army Corps something to do after World War II ended. So after the U.S. Army Corps was authorized, then it ended up just recommending 4 dams be built for that 140-mile stretch to make it navigable. The engineer said it probably should be more than 4, but because of the cost and other issues, they decided just to put 4 in, which required very high navigation locks. I think I read it was the highest engineering of locks they had to do to date to decide on those. So immediately after the Congress had authorized the dams, federal and state fish scientists started expressing concerns about fish passage. And you can find some studies from the 1940s, such as the 1949 Washington State Fisheries Report, which warned the dams on the Lower Snake would be a serious threat to the Columbia fishery. And there were very strong words in that report that says, we're trading one of the greatest fish resources in our country for a little bit of hydropower and taxpayers subsidized barging. They said that in the report at the time. There are also other reports from Idaho Fish and Game and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the same effect at that time. And not just the fish scientists, but very powerful interests, including the House Appropriations Committee and President Eisenhower, were opposed to constructing the Lower Snake River dams because they were not in the public interest. They thought it was a waste of taxpayer money. And so President Eisenhower refused to sign budgets whenever Congress would send him one for about 4 years. He refused to do it. And then at the very last minute in 1955, Washington Senator Magnuson, who was very powerful and was instrumental in getting these dams built, stuck a backroom rider to fund a little bit of road construction to Ice Harbor Dam onto a major budget bill he knew Eisenhower would sign and not veto. And so with that, these dams were almost never got off the ground, but by gosh, they did. So the Lower Snake River dams were ultimately built. Construction on Ice Harbor started immediately after that backroom maneuver by Magnuson in the following year, 1956. Ice Harbor Dam, the first one, came online in 1961, then Lower Monumental, then Little Goose, and then in 1975, the final nail in the coffin, literally, and that would be Lower Granite Dam, went in. There were a number of budget skirmishes and lawsuits that, again, almost stopped these dams. So they came within a hair of not ever being built. So you keep looking back and saying, golly, if we could have just stopped them back then. The affected treaty tribes with rights to salmon by their treaties did not consent. They weren't consulted. They were just, pretty much bulldozed over. I chose that bulldozer symbol for a reason. The tribes and the salmon were basically bulldozed. Key tribes that had interest in the salmon fishing and usual and accustomed sites would be the Shoshone-Bannock, who are actually upstream of the dams, but they used to harvest plentiful salmon way almost to the Continental Divide in Idaho. The Nez Perce are huge players in this battle. They've been doing some amazing work restoring salmon and fighting for the salmon. Also important are the Umatilla, Warm Springs, and Yakima tribes in this fight. A lot of people don't really know who owns these. I'm often asked, who owns these dams and who owns this land? It's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that owns and operates all 4 Lower Snake River dams. The U.S. Army Corps also owns most land under the reservoirs and along the banks. There's a few private ranchers and a few vacation cabins, but mostly it's all federal land owned by the Army Corps, 14,000 acres across a 140-mile former river corridor. The important point about that U.S. Army Corps of Engineer ownership to keep in mind is that makes it, these dams are actually part of the military industrial complex. They're administered under the Department of Defense. So that explains a lot about why there's so much opacity and lack of transparency about the operations. It's a, Department of Defense agency, and they don't like to come clean with the public. I mean, that's my view anyway. And if you go to these dams, you'll see all these very imposing signs. You can't stop and take pictures. It's got some major fencing. You'll go through a significant security check if you go across them or go to the visitor center. So they take this very seriously. The power from those dams that are generated is sold by the Bonneville Power Agency, referred to shorthand as BPA, to regional local power authorities under contracts and through spot markets. So the BPA is also a really important player in this mix. So the primary purposes of the 4 lower Snake River dams are navigation and hydropower production. There's also secondary purposes of irrigation and recreation. However, there are no flood control benefits. You'll often hear people like Dan Newhouse, who's the representative in the region, say something like, oh, these dams are so important for flood control. Actually, they're not. Even the Army Corps admits on their website, there's no flood control from these dams. They're called run of the river, which means they don't store water. So if there's a lot of water coming down, the Army Corps has to release it. There's no flood control with these dams. So I'm going to talk quickly about the 2 primary purposes, hydropower and barging a little, and navigation in a little bit. So BPA is the Pacific Northwest electricity marketing arm of the federal government. It's actually a federal agency, but it's sort of this hybrid quasi, I don't even know what to call it, quasi-corporate, but it's a federal entity. So to me, it's like it's like the worst of both worlds, corporate and federal government combined. It's a Depression era agency that was put in place at the height of the Depression, as dams and cheap electricity were part of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. His goal with these giant dams like Grand Coulee were to move populations from the depressed Dust Bowl that was experiencing extreme hardships, the worst hard time, to the Northwest to create the Jeffersonian ideal of small farmers and develop the resources of the Northwest, which had very few people, relatively speaking, at the time. And as I mentioned, the cheap hydropower, World War II, U.S. might, planes, and aluminum were key industries that needed a lot of power. So those big dams were helpful and very much appreciated at that time. So how much do the Snake River dams generate? Just about 4% of the Pacific Northwest hydropower. It's really what I call a rounding error. It's not that much, and they fluctuate. The key about the Snake River dams is since they're run of the river, they don't store water. So it's more dependent on the actual flow of the Snake River, which tends to be quite seasonal. With snow melt, it will have a high flow in the spring, which is when the Northwest doesn't really need that much energy because we have temperate, temperatures. It's not real hot, it's not real cold. So we tend to have the most power from those Snake River dams when it's not really needed. In the summer, when people are running their air conditioning, the flow goes a lot lower. And in the winter, the flow is also quite low. And apart from the flow, these dams are now being forced by an interim agreement and the court action I'll be talking about to spill a lot of water so they can try to simulate more of a free-flowing river, because that's what salmon need, is more salmon need a river. Who would have thought? So by spilling more water, they can't generate as much electricity. So it's kind of a double whammy. The Snake River doesn't have a great flow most of the time, and plus it's being subject to these spill requirements. So they just aren't generating that much power anymore. So BPA structure, they really rely on long-term contracts with local utilities like public utility districts and electrical co-ops. And then they sell their extra beyond those requirements to the spot or market sales of surplus power. And it's really important to understand BPA's financial model is that they relied on that sale of surplus power to California that were at rates higher than its local utility, what they call the preference customers. So BPA would make a lot of money off California, especially like in the Enron era back there, when California had huge demands. So BPA has had to spend a lot of money of its ratepayers on failed salmon mitigation to try to stop the impacts of these dams on salmon. It's spent, now the estimate's about $18 billion in the last few decades in attempted fixes to make these dams more salmon friendly and increase salmon production. Some examples, and we'll see some pictures here in a minute. Smolt bypass structures, barging, and what I mean by that is they actually barge, the Army Corps actually barges the smolts around to try to get them downstream faster. So it operates, you'll see it says salmon barge on it, and they take the little smolts downstream to try to bypass the other dams and also get them downstream faster. BPA has funded restoration projects like revegetation, which I'm all for revegetation and restoration, but most of these upper spawning areas are already pristine and they don't really need to be spending the money there. They need to be spending it downstream. Hatcheries, and then one of my favorite is BPA has a big bounty program to fishermen to catch predator fish like pike minnow. I understand some fishermen actually can make a pretty good living. Like there's one guy that made like $50K just by catching pike minnow and collecting it from BPA. Because pike minnow eats salmon, so BPA figures this is what we'll do for another mitigation program, pay these guys to fish and catch pike minnow. So BPA is undergoing a lot of changes because California, I'm sure lots of you know, is converting to wind and solar, becoming more energy self-sufficient and lessening demand to buy from BPA. And actually, this chart is a little old, but it's still relevant. I think it's probably about 3 years old now since I presented this. So since 2012, California's installed 9,000 megawatts of solar power, which is the equivalent of 15 Snake River dams. With the spill and the minimal flow, the Snake River dams, all four of them are now generating about 700 megawatts a year. So that gives you an idea. The supply of power is increasing due to conservation in wind and solar, which is also coming online in Washington and Oregon, putting downward pressure on rates. And then finally, there's still all these other big mainstem Columbia dams, like the John Day, the Bonneville, or Grand Coulee dams, and they can provide a lot of power. Like Grand Coulee is literally a monster when it comes to power. It generates, let's see, I wrote it down somewhere, 2,400 megawatts. So my math isn't so great, but that's like more than 7.5 times what the 4 lower Snake River dams generate. So we have plenty of power in the Northwest. Another really important point to keep in mind as we talk about breaching is that BPA faces aging infrastructure that's going to be costly and difficult to maintain and replace. These turbines are hugely expensive and now they're aging. It's even hard to find people to both craft and maintain them because I call it Depression era type infrastructure that people are now moving on to wind and solar. And their very elaborate fish bypass structures are going to need rehab and replacement, all very expensive stuff. Now, one thing, if you are in the Northwest, you hear about how clean and green and carbon neutral our power is because it's hydropower. Well, I would make the point that infrastructure causing the demise of keystone species like salmon and orcas is not clean and green. But as we learn more about it, there's Washington State University in Eastern Washington has been doing studies about the large stagnant reservoirs, which also heat up intensely during the summer. They're finding that the dams are significant sources of methane because of the algae that grows and emits these gases in the summer especially. And we know that methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Also, when you go there, these are, I call them barren hellholes, frankly, because the Army Corps removed native vegetation when those reservoirs were put in and the dams as well. They lined the banks with this really hot and dark riprap, these great big rocks, which also greatly diminishes carbon storage. So if the dams are breached and the river bottom is restored or there's small organic farms going in, that will greatly enhance vegetation and sequester more carbon. So that's a little primer on the hydropower aspect. So I'm going to quickly start touching on the navigation, which is barging and cruise ships. I'd like to point out that people have been navigating the Snake River for a long time before it got turned into slackwater reservoirs. There used to be steamships on the Snake in the 1800s, and they even took wheat down to market. Now, you had to be a pretty good pilot to get them down there because there were rapids. But the point being, we did manage to use the Snake River for commerce back then. And then, of course, people have been using the Snake River for navigation since time immemorial. The tribes used it for getting around and coming over for trading to the coast and going down to Sk'aliCh'elh Falls to fish. So people have been using the Snake River for navigation without these dams for a long time. So with those locks that are in the dams, the locks are very complicated and require frequent maintenance. They actually have to sometimes shut down the locks for several months, and somehow the wheat farmers still get their products to market. The shipping channels fill with sediment, which requires dredging. The Army Corps will provide passage for free to any vessel that shows up and wants to go through. So you can take your power boat or your sailboat for that matter. And right now you can go up the Columbia to the Snake and you can lock right through. The U.S. taxpayer is paying all this freight since there's no tolls for barges or any charges through there. The estimated taxpayer subsidy per barge by a friend of mine that's really kind of into the math and wonkiness says at least $35K per barge, taxpayer subsidized. Very quickly on the left, you can see this is barging by volume. That's the Mississippi way over on the left. Snake is way over on the right. It's essentially a negligible amount of freight that is transported through the Snake. This chart here probably tells you all you really need to know about freight on the lower Snake. It used to be more back in the 80s, and it's drastically reduced now, way reduced from where it used to be. The primary customers of the shipping on the Snake are wheat farmers who ship by barge, but they are starting to use trains more often. It turns out that the trains give them more flexibility on where they send the product to market. Tracks along the Snake have been there for many years. They, in fact, were relocated when the dams were built. Taxpayers paid for that. There are many upgrades. They can take heavy freight. And each unit train that the farmers are switching to can actually carry 4 times what the barges carry. So what's going to happen if the Snake River dams are breached to our wheat farmers, who will tell you it's going to be the end of their careers and they're going to have to go out of business? I think you can all guarantee the Palouse wheat farmers will still get their products to ports for export market via train or truck. They've been doing it since the 1880s. And remember, these dams didn't go in until they really weren't complete until 1975. So for 100 years, essentially, the wheat farmers managed to get their products to market. I actually grew up on a farm where we grew wheat, and we didn't have the taxpayer subsidized barging like this, and we still got our products to market. I'm confident that our farmers and our representatives can figure out a way to address this. There will also be grain shipping still possible on the Columbia to the Pacific, just at Tri-Cities. Tri-Cities is about 2 hours west by truck or train from Lewiston. So that is kind of navigation in a nutshell. I want to move on very quickly to the salmon crisis, because that's really what is the big deal about this. The biggest impact it has been on salmon from the Snake River dams. They were listed under the Endangered Species Act in the 1990s. I would say the other biggest impact has been on tribal, cultural, and treaty rights to fish. Since 1993, there has been a long-running court battle in Portland. I call it the 30 Years' War. I think it's now, it's been 30 years since this was filed in 1993. And as I mentioned before, $18 billion spent trying to mitigate it. The biggest losers with the Snake River dams are indeed the salmon. So if you just look over on your left, you will see that before those dams went in, there were hundreds of thousands of wild Snake River spring summer Chinook, which is what the orcas really love, coming up. And it's been dropping off drastically. You can actually see as soon as the dams were completed in the mid-70s, it was really a catastrophe with the salmon, especially the smolts were being heavily impacted by the dams. Mitigation and hatcheries came online and boosted it, especially with good ocean conditions. But they're still way down. They're trending down below 10,000 numbers returning. I don't want to get too wonky, but it's important to understand the fisheries biologists have this smolt to adult ratio called an SAR. And all it really means is how many smolts are coming down, how many adults are coming back. And the biologists say a smolt to adult ratio of 2 to 6% is needed to assure the survival of the fish, salmon, and steelhead that are listed. Snake River SARs are less than 2%. So it's not recovery. They are spiraling towards extinction is what I hear a lot. The wonky thing about this again is on the SARs. The important thing take away from this chart is that the more dams that the salmon and steelhead have to cross, the lower their SAR. So the fewer adults come back to spawn. If there's only a couple dams, they're doing really well, like the Deschutes River, 6.9%. They're increasing their numbers. But by the time you get above the dams, we're talking 0.8%. That is not sustainable. They are spiraling towards extinction. One other point to make is that if you're a salmon fisherman, you know this, that the Chinook salmon are much smaller now than they used to be. You see all these pictures of guys holding like that huge fish on the right, which almost looks like a halibut, but it's a Chinook. Clearly, our southern resident orcas with their size, that's what they evolved to eat, is giant salmon and not something that's 15, 20 pounds. So a lot of folks say, why don't we just put some fish ladders up if there's problem with passage? Well, the Snake River dams have fish ladders. So what's the problem here? This is Lower Granite's fish ladder, by the way. The real problem is the reservoirs that are created behind the dams. Hot, stagnant reservoirs that are backed up for this 140-mile stretch. If you've been to this part of the world, it's really hot. Eastern Washington is super hot in the summer. It's quite common to have triple-digit temperatures for 30 to 60 days over there. And of course, we know climate change is heating things up. It's also very ironic. The Army Corps itself will admit that they have studied this in several formal processes, EISs they've done. They have always found that breaching the Snake River dams is the most effective for salmon recovery. But every time they stick with the status quo and just add in more mitigation, more taxpayer dollars, more BPA ratepayer dollars. So hatcheries are one of the things mitigation money has gone on. I essentially call them feedlots for fish. The fish get lazy. They don't learn to hunt. They don't learn to hide from predators. These hatchery fish are highly inferior to wild fish. And also, according to people like Dr. Giles, nutritionally inferior to our wild fish. This structure here, this is Lower Monumental Dam. This is the fish bypass. This is the juvenile fish bypass from above the dam. It brings out the smolts and dumps them out at the end of this to try to get around the dam so they don't get the bins going through it. I mentioned that the Army Corps barges smolts. This is one of the fish barges. And you can see these tanks. There's little smolts in here. So the Army Corps likes to point to this as that's one thing they're doing to try to speed the juveniles downriver. Well, you know what it's like to be a passenger in a car and you're not driving. You don't really remember your way down. So when they come back as adults, they don't remember how to go through here and they get confused. They don't go to the right place to spawn. Fisheries experts support dam removal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can find tons of scientific data with all kinds of credible, highly reputable and credentialed scientists that say the only way we're going to recover these salmon is by Snake River Dam breaching. This audience also knows why salmon decline matters to the southern residents, because they rely very heavily on Chinook salmon. It's 80 to 90% of their diet. And especially Snake River and Columbia salmon are important because NOAA's research has shown this is the Columbia River, which remember the Snake is a tributary upstream, is that this is one of the tagged southern residents that they were monitoring. And you can see for several months in the spring and late winter, early spring, the southern residents were out here feeding right off the Columbia for this nutritious wild salmon they're wanting to have come down. So orca experts also say immediate Snake River Dam removal is needed to prevent their extinction, such as Dr. Giles that we've had on the show before. Probable breaching the 4 lower Snake River dams is the single most important measure we can take in the U.S. to recover abundant salmon and steelhead to permit the southern resident orcas to survive. I think that just says it all. Other scientists agree, and they've written to Governor Inslee and many others to say we got to take out these dams if we want our orcas to survive. So I like this graphic. If our orcas could say it, this is it. They'd say breach the lower Snake River dams. Southern resident orcas need wild salmon. The snake can be free again. This is the Army Corps' own rendering of what the Snake River would look like after breaching. To make it more cost effective, the Army Corps suggested in their 2002 study just narrowing the river and keeping these structures. I think they'd make a great museum, or maybe we cover them with solar panels or something else, but they will stay post breaching, and we'll just have the river going by it. So this is where I really wanted to spend some time. This is what's going on now with the dams. So where we are legally is that the Army Corps did that second study I mentioned, the 2020 decision, which is called the CRSO-EIS, if you want to sound wonky, which recommended against breaching the Snake River dams, even though it does offer the best way to recover ESA-listed salmon and steelhead. At the same time, NOAA issued a biological opinion called a BO. Continuing operations of the Snake River dams won't jeopardize ESA-listed salmon and the orcas. So immediately after that 2020 decision, Round 6 gets started in the U.S. District Court in Oregon, the same parties that have been suing since 1993, which are a number of conservation organizations, including Sierra Club and National Wildlife Federation and many others. Nez Perce Tribe and the state of Oregon have filed suit again, saying that 2020 EIS and biological opinion are legally and scientifically flawed. What has happened is as soon as President Biden came into power, he decided that that 2020 EIS and biological opinion are not defensible. It was pretty obvious to anybody who looked at them. So the parties in the case agreed to stay it, to stop it, put it on hold, and pursue settlement discussions. And that's where March 31, this coming Friday, the federal mediation as part of that lawsuit has scheduled a listening session for groups or people who are not parties to that lawsuit, not part of it, to comment about the Snake River dams or salmon or tribal rights or whatever your concerns are. President Biden is expected to decide very soon on how this case is going to be settled. People are saying probably by mid-April, he's going to decide, will this settlement include agreeing to breach the Snake River dams, or is it just going to be more mitigation and more studies? So for those of us that care about salmon and orcas, it's a key opportunity to influence Biden and other federal decision makers. Council on Environmental Quality, Department of Energy, Interior, Defense, and Commerce are also key agencies. Those of us that have looked at this, we think that Biden can agree to breaching as part of a settlement, and that it would likely be more, it would likely withstand Congress or a Supreme Court review rather than if Biden just acts by executive order or a military order. Besides the legal aspects, there's some other really important developments since that 2020 EIS and biological opinion came out. A key one has been Idaho U.S. Representative Mike Simpson's Columbia Basin Plan, where Mike Simpson from Idaho proposed a very comprehensive breaching, restoration, and mitigation package for the Pacific Northwest. I can talk a lot about Simpson, but we're running out of time. But he's sincere, and I really appreciated that, and it started the ball rolling with this conversation. Then later that year, the Nez Perce Fisheries Department issued a report saying that nearly half of the ESA-listed fish above the Snake River dams in that fabulous habitat are at impending risk of extinction in the next 10 years. So that's code red to me. It's like, it's flashing. We got to do something now. Senator Murray and Governor Inslee were also doing their own study, and they came out with a report, I think it was last summer, that breaching the Snake River dams does provide the best chance to recover snake salmon, but they must replace the Snake River dam services, the hydropower and the barging specifically, first. So I thought that was, they're trying to find political cover, saying, yeah, the scientists say this, but we still got to take care of our wheat growers and industry and electricity. But it did at least move the needle again towards breaching. And then the piece de resistance was this recent NOAA final report that came out at the end of September, rebuilding salmon and steelhead in the Columbia River Basin, where NOAA said it's a high priority to recover Snake River salmon by restoration of the lower Snake River through dam breaching. So if you've been following NOAA over the decades, this is like a seismic shift for NOAA to talk about dam breaching and recovering salmon. So that report is huge. You can pull it up off the internet just by Googling those terms. So to recap, breaching the Snake River dams can happen now. President Biden can use his executive authority to breach. We think the best shot is by settling the current salmon lawsuit with an agreement to breach. But as Commander-in-Chief of the Department of Defense, I personally think that Biden can issue a command to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, his military chain of command, say, breach the dams. And there's also executive orders are something that Biden could use. He's already issued ones that are very strong and could form the basis for Snake River Dam breaching on climate change, his 30 by 30 initiative to increase protected lands and wildlife and corridors. That many others also think that the Army Corps itself can implement dam breaching without congressional authorization, calling mothballing of assets. So that could be a possibility as well. The real takeaway is that salmon, orcas, sport commercial fishermen, tribal treaty rights just can't wait 5 or more years. We really are heading towards extinction. Snake River breaching and restoration would benefit the entire ecosystem. More salmon smolts would survive the downstream trip, increase in ocean numbers out there. Fish biologists say actually it would be 2 million more smolts per dam that are currently not surviving the trip down the river, which would mean lots more adult salmon becoming available for tribes, estimated about 500,000 within just a couple years after the dams are breached. Then we all know, of course, there's eagles, there's bears, orcas need more salmon, and they would have a lot more food. Point I like to make is that before breaching, the lower Snake River Dam was a paradise, a riparian paradise for things like frogs and otters and bats and beavers. My Palouse friends with the Palouse tribe have told me, but pre-breaching, they called it, their name for the Snake River had to do with how many beavers were there. And that would all be coming back if the dams are breached. For people, hydropower can be replaced if needed. I think there's still plenty of power, but wind and solar can come online very quickly with storage. Navigation, yes, the shippers will have to switch to truck or rail along most of the Snake, but they can still barge from Tri-Cities if they want. There's about a baker's dozen of farmers, big corporate farms primarily around Ice Harbor Dam, that need to have their irrigation lines extended and modified. And then the current recreationalists tend to be power boats, bass fishermen, jet skiers. They are not going to have their big stagnant reservoirs to run around on, so they will be impacted, but there are plenty of other reservoirs and lakes in the region. For people, there'll be a lot more salmon available for tribes, sport, commercial fishers. Recreation, so the power boaters may not be happy, but there'll be 140 miles of free-flowing river, attracting rafters, kayakers, salmon, steelhead fishers, bird watchers, campers, hikers. I'd love to see a 140-mile long-distance trail put through there. It's a wonderful place to go and enjoy and bird watch and reflect on the river. And probably the most important from my perspective as a tribal rights advocate is that tribes would have cultural and treaty rights restored, access to their usual and accustomed sites, more salmon, more lamprey, more sturgeon. There are many old villages and ancestral lands that are now buried under the reservoirs that I understand the tribes very much like to have come back. I'd like to point out that breaching the Snake River dams will actually enhance our efforts to combat climate change. There'll be colder, more oxygenated water, substantial reduction of methane emissions that are currently being produced from the stagnant reservoirs. The restored native vegetation will sequester carbon and cool air. More nutrients brought from more salmon coming upstream will enhance Idaho's forests, which are currently nutrient deprived, and the salmon will also have the high elevation refuges in Idaho's salmon stronghold for continued spawning and migration. So a lot of people hear this presentation and say, this all sounds great, but why haven't we breached the dams already? I would point to several reasons: bureaucratic resistance and inertia, BPA, Army Corps, county commissioners, local PUDs, etc. Powerful special interests, ports, irrigators, farmers' trade organizations have been battling breaching for many decades, but since before the dams were even built, they still battled to get them in. And then, of course, lack of political will. I do point to our Washington electeds like Inslee and Murray and Cantwell, who may be softening. It's clearly those Eastern Washington congressional representatives are dug in, and I mean literally. This is probably the most adamant pro-dam person in the world, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who's there with, what would you want to say? The other one who was really, shall we say, very business friendly. Kathy McMorris Rogers was being considered for Interior Secretary under Trump, and I'm so glad he chose somebody else. So what can you do about all this? I mentioned that listening session that's coming up. There's a settlement process. Sign up to listen. That's March 31st. President Biden is the main target, as well as the other secretaries. We'll go over some addresses and targets. there's also some petitions out there that we can find for you to sign, and that would be Southern resident orcas are starving. It's up to almost 1 million signatures. They're trying to get 1 million. It's like 924,000. And also the Umatilla Youth Council has a petition that they plan to deliver to President Biden on April 15th, and they're trying to get 25,000 signatures. They're almost there. Citizen advocacy and action are just vital. They're crucial. Other things you can do, join, donate money or needed items and services to groups that are working on. Also, there's lots of information, books, films, and go there yourself and see what's at stake. So in closing, I'd like to say my favorite thing for dealing with the Snake River dams has been to become an activist. The North Olympic Orca Pod, my advocacy group that I co-founded, we dress up in orca suits. Each one of us that represents a Southern resident orca. And here we are actually making a trip to the dams with our signs and our orca suits. This is Little Goose Dam that we went to in 2016. Flotillas to free the snake are energizing and great to participate in. I've really enjoyed my time with that. I participated, you can see me here with 2015. I was starting to make that connection with more salmon for the orcas. Would also have more orcas coming. So that was my meme and I've stuck with it. More salmon and more orcas. Christina was here and she can talk about it. The remaining 74 assembly in Olympia, big rally, great, super energizing. So with that, I will close and we can take comments. I know we're running short on time, so Annette probably wants to kick it over to some other folks. Take care.
I think it's okay if we go over a little. This is all very interesting. Some of the main things, more comments than questions, I would say, coming in. But people are saying, okay, so how do we sign on to the initiative? How we do that? So people are like, okay, what can I do? And this is where we're going next. So there's lots of things you can do. Christina, do you want to summarize a few, and I could put up some of the things you're talking about?
You can go anywhere. You can go to, like, I went to the pavilion on Friday night and I didn't get very many postcards signed. I think it's because it was really cold and windy. I don't know. But then, and we had the orca outfit and everything. But then we went to Safeway the next day, and just as long as you stand like on the sidewalk or whatever, you're allowed. It's legal, and you can get postcards signed and also just share information, because there's a lot of people that don't have any idea about any of this. And you can also get together and just have like letter writing parties, postcard parties, and or you can just get yourself and your family to do that, and your neighbor or your mom or your cousin, because I'm just urging you to please get as many people as you can to write to the Biden administration and just beg, plead, anyway, whatever you want to do to get these dams breached. So, I mean, because we're talking about an entire ecosystem. And so what is the price of an entire ecosystem? So this is like really important. This is about 137 species. And the orcas are already, they have to go all the way to California, to try and get some salmon. And we just need to bring the salmon back in. It's just vital. So those are a lot of things you can do. I mean, there's more that you can do, but right now, in the next couple of weeks, that's the most important thing, is just, and call, and you can call. And you can leave a message. Yeah. So if you do all of those and get other people to do all of those, it really, really makes a difference. Yeah.
We have a few things that we were able to show when we did our PSA this week, but www.whitehouse.gov/contact will give you information. And then there's an actual comment line where you can call, and it's a line for comments. So for the Biden administration. So I'm going to keep that up for just a second. If you guys want to write that down, you're able to make some comments. And then damtruth.org is a wonderful website. I'm going to share my screen real quick just to show you guys where you can find some sample letters, and then we'll show a sample letter as well that you can go in and do. So let me, Deb Cruz, you're going to see a little square pop up. If you can let me know when that's that. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to go to. Hold on. Maybe it is. I think that's just the talking points. Let me go back real quick. So do you see that there, Deb? I can't hear you because I got you muted, I think. All right, let's go ahead and add that to the stream there, Deb Cruz. You should see it says under my name now. I got it. So here's the site, damntruth.org. I'll go back one more just to show you there's all kinds of stuff on this site, you guys. But if you go here in the middle in the menu and click on Take Action, right here in big purple, you go down, there's other places, people that you can send messages to. But right here in the purple, there's a letter writing campaign. If you click on that and you scroll down, there's some actual sample letters for you guys to be able to use. I highly recommend checking this out. It's a super easy to navigate site. I'll put one of the letters up. I was able to see. Here's a sample. And the title's Please Breach the 4 Lower Snake River Dams in southeastern Washington. Dear Mr. President, I'm writing about a decades-long situation in the Pacific Northwest that's beyond crisis stage. Only you can fix it fast enough. 4 dams on the Lower Snake River have been killing salmon and steelhead populations for 50 years. Without dam breaching, the fish will not survive. It goes on and on and on, detailing. So someone asked a while ago too, like, hey, where's some of this information that we're able to cite if we're going to be having this conversation? Again, I highly recommend going to damntruth.org. And this is just one of the sample letters. There's also talking points. So these are factual talking points for whoever it was that was asking a while ago. I'm sorry, I lost the comment. But where can we get this information to share to have these conversations? This is definitely one place. Christina was talking about getting out there with your signs. I'm going to show some more. There's getting out there and, holding a sign up sparks conversation, right? Look, there's Christina with all her stuff. We have, this was today, right, Deborah?
That was today, just a couple hours ago, yeah.
So get out there. There's a quick little video I'm going to show you. Deborah was out there. It shows you in Vegas, and then it shows you today. So just to show the difference, let's play a little bit of that. Viva Las Vegas. The dancing Debs might start dancing again.
Las Vegas turning day into night.
Okay, Washington, we're on the second strip. Show the Bellagio. Show the residents. Eat salmon. Breathe them down. Thousands of people are seeing this banner. Breathe the dam. Breathe the dam. Breathe the dam.
I'm gonna give it everything I've got. Lady luck, please let the dice stay hot. Let me shoot the sun with every shot. Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas!
Breathe the dam.
All right. So
You need a megaphone. You need, for sure, you need a megaphone.
I have one, Alejandro. I have one. Hey,
Well, I don't know if there was dancing Debs, but there was dancing Alejandro in the background there. He was jamming. People are asking for the link. So again, www.damntruth.org. You guys, lots and lots of information. Ula, absolutely. I'll post it on my page so that you can share from there. Christina, I don't know. I think there was more you wanted to say. I'm not sure. I kind of cut you off.
No, I don't have more to say. I mean, Deb Ellers, your presentation was awesome. It was
Amazing.
excellent. So much information. I don't know. I mean, I think that just everyone that can get anyone else to do this is the most important thing, because we need the numbers. We just need the numbers. So yeah, Deb Ellers, thank you so much for your presentation. It was awesome.
Well,
There
I'm
were-
glad I'm glad it was helpful. So I was going to say, don't feel like you have to follow those templates either. Feel free to write your own letter if you're so moved. Use the talking points. The more personalized it is, I think the more impact it has. If you don't have time to write a letter, though, think about just a postcard. Postcards are really effective because they don't have to be screened through the postal service. They just go right into the elected officials without going through the holding process. So at least I think a hard copy postcard will go a long ways to getting their attention.
so
Also,
many
handwriting letters is more effective as well if you have the time to handwrite the letter rather than just print it out. Just another.
Or even if you can change the opening paragraph and say, I'm so and so, I'm a resident here. You know, that helps.
Christine Harvey Lauren said that was me screaming "Breach the dams" in the video.
That was Christine.
She was with you, yeah.
She was with me on all those Las Vegas actions, and we would take it on the overpass. And I was just trying to compare how it would look with people, and then how it worked today on Highway 20. And I would just, everything everybody said, I would just add like the power of social media to that. Like if you're at your party, take a picture, hashtags. That way, when they see that you're having a good time with what you're defending, and it might inspire people more. So the power of social media, share your actions.
Yeah, and somebody said that we need to have dancing orcas at our events. Actually, our Orca Pod does have several dance numbers. We have done Staying Alive. We've done Gangnam Style. And I can tell you, I am not a dancer or performer. I really was a business attorney. My colleagues would not believe I run around in an orca suit. I'm going to call my autobiography From a Business Suit to an Orca Suit after the
Oh, cool. Cool.
And somebody else said we need stickers. I have stickers. I've got stickers. I've got signs if we can figure out how to get them to folks.
Yeah. Debra.
And I think we need to change the words to the song "Viva Las Orcas."
That's what somebody in the comments
It'd be a
said.
great
Yeah.
tune.
Radis, I think, said that.
Yeah, that was the Bellagio's choice. So.
No, but how cool was that? I mean, just they have that water show, right? And so many people gather right there to see this, and then you just, like, how many of those people were like, hey, what's this about? And then
They
go
do. They stop and they ask. And Christine and I I think it was her aunt, and people would sign petitions. Just carry those letters with you and your postcards with you everywhere. Put them in your lunchbox, throw a few extras in your bag. And then when the conversations come up, you got it. You're like, okay, I'm not gonna trust you to go look it up. Here it is. And you have them sign it. But yeah, so that was Las Vegas. Las Vegas is huge, but everybody has a place in their town like that. Like Christina went to the pavilion. Everybody has a park every town has a place where there's a lot of people. Go there, dance around in an orca, take a blow up orca, take an orca kite, anything that just attracts attention. And then people will talk to you.
People care everywhere.
They care.
And when we did our PSA and people were saying, we can we do that if we're out of country? Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And so don't think because you're in another country that you can't, sign on to these things. Again, go to damntruth.org and go to Take Action. You can take action too, because we do care, and we all have a voice. We don't have to live right there to be able to scream out loud, and get people to act. People want to make a difference. People want to help. So give them the avenues to do that. Debra Ellers, the comments coming in through your presentation, just wow. We could have split this up into 3 easily. So I appreciate you getting all that information packed in there. People are probably going to need to go back and watch. It was a lot of information, a lot of really helpful information. Every time, I love us because I learn so much every time too. And it's just, the different people and different views. Deb Cruz, you're super passionate about this. You share that all the time. I just appreciate all of you so much. Howard, what do you want to say? Yep.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. That was absolutely fantastic. That really covered it, soup to nuts, the whole history, and I especially like the scenes from the wilderness, the pristine Idaho, upriver. We don't appreciate that enough. We don't have enough images, but that's really what it's about. Revitalizing that will nourish the orcas. That's what we need to do. So beautifully done. My sort of pet wonky interest is in the amounts of the federal funding. I think that's a pretty good argument, but I've never really heard numbers. We talk about 18 billion has been spent since 22 years ago or so on salmon mitigation. But what is it ongoing every year? I know Representative Simpson has threatened to block funding. That's one possibility. That would definitely expedite reaching. But I think, it's a sort of a conservative argument to not waste taxpayer money, and it's being wasted. You mentioned it in your presentation, but it'd be good to sort of zero in on how much, but I haven't been able to find that number. How much federal funding goes into BPA and the Army Corps?
Like I said, Howard, it's part of the military-industrial complex. It's hard to get numbers out of the Army Corps. It's really hard. A lot of people try to do FOIAs. Yeah, so I also have a lot more details on the tribal rights aspects and a whole bunch of other economics. So there's more.
There's so much story, but you touched on all of it.
Yeah, I do hope you come back, Deborah, and share some more in-depth, because when we started TokiTV is all about faith, prayer, and education, and people want to know, man. People want to learn. So this was really informative. I do hope you come back on soon, and let's follow. I mean, I'd like to follow, once a month, just, like what's going to happen this week, right? On March 31st, where's this going to go? Where's this going to go from there? And what outcome is that? I know Christina's registered. I'm registered. I'm not registered to speak, but I'm registered to attend. Deborah and Deb. You guys, if you don't remember, I think we put this up last week. I don't know if I put the site, the actual website to register. I don't know if I still have that on the.
And it takes less than a minute. Bloop,
yeah, Deb, please, can you try to find that real quick, and we can maybe put that up where people can go to register, so you guys can at least listen in to the conference.
And also, it counts that you're there just to support. And maybe you might be able to speak if someone doesn't show up. I think that happened to me once before when I did one of these. So I'm looking for it too.
I know, I'm looking. I'm like, I'm on the site. I'm trying to find the actual link to attend that.
Here it is.
See who can find it first. It's probably going to be Deb Cruz, but I'm trying. Alejandro,
not with my inbox.
We'll let you talk a little bit, Alejandro.
What I'm thinking, I think we are running out of the time with this. This is an emergency, and we must breach the dams because of the salmon, because of the southern residents orcas, and because of the lamination. That's the only I want to say. So I think we need to make like a kind of revolution in that area. Just bring more people, bring the local channels, to bring attention. Something big, a big dam or something. I would love to stay there, I would glad to help if I live closer.
Thank you, Alejandro. You're one of my heroes. I'm glad to finally be on the same program with you.
Okay.
Alondo's
you.
awesome.
And you already have an orca suit, so you're set.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, you give me one.
So we just give you a sign. I don't know why I can't find this.
I know that's so weird, and I know it was on our text messages too. So I'm looking and looking. Sorry,
Okay,
guys, should have had that up because that is Friday, and you should still be able to tend to listen.
I know Deb Cruz sent it out through her Justice UU because I got it a couple days ago, which I sent to you, Annette, as well.
Yeah, you know how many things I have. Hold on.
Yeah, I do. I got an idea.
I just sent it to you, Annette. I just sent it. You should
We gotta put it in the. I want the website. Is what I want. I want the actual website.
What I see is a short link.
Hold on, we're gonna get this.
I can't find it.
That link is very short.
It is short. It is. It's not a big giant thing here. Let's see. Oh no, it's not short. It's very long.
I was just kidding. I was just kidding.
I thought it was gonna be short.
Okay.
The problem is this is going to my phone, not my computer.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, anyways, Deb, I really appreciate all of your efforts with this presentation, and I also am planning on doing that presentation at the library. That's another thing that people can do is, go to your local library and talk to them and see if you can do a presentation. They're usually really open to anything like that. Just so you know, there's just so many things you can do, just educating people, because it's like amazing how many people have no idea what's going on. So, and we got it up there, right? Did we get it up there?
I have it. I'm gonna put it in the chat right now from my phone so that people can actually click on it. Because if I do it, there we go. There's a big giant link coming your way, guys, in the comments. And
yeah, and somebody posted it too.
Okay, cool.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right, cool. Sorry, but that should not have taken that long. But yeah, so you guys check it out. You guys can attend on Friday. Just, we're gonna keep doing what we do. Just a reminder, we're here every week for Sk'aliCh'elh-tenaut. We're gonna continue to meet every single week until she's home and even beyond, because we're all gonna want to know how she's doing there too. So just thank you guys for being here. We have to save the salmon for so many reasons that were listed, and her family needs us. They need our voices. So thank you guys for being here. Howard, Garrett, anything you want to say before we close?
No, this has just been so educational and inspirational and energizing. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And let's get those dams down and keep those orcas.
Let's do it. I have a quick closing video with our song that we play often. She is well, she is whole, she is home. But I put it with the plan for her Lummi Talk, for her home, for her sea pen, and along with the GoFundMe. So you guys, you want to know what you can do? That's something you can do. $5, $10, $1,000, whatever you want. Put it in there and let's keep raising the funds to make this happen. She is coming home. We know that. So let's all do our part, and we will see you all next week. And we'll see you Thursday for our meditation. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you,
Deborah.
Yes.
Thank you, Deborah.
Bye-bye.
For the information.
Years and years of waiting, there was no escaping, but now she has hope. All our hands are working to stop her heart from hurting. Now we can affirm and know that she is home. Where she belongs. She is well, she is whole, she is home. She is well, she is whole, she is home. She is well.
She